In this lecture, we will discuss special education programs and who qualifies for special education. Special education is any program provided for children with disabilities instead of or in addition to the general education classroom program. The practice of special education has changed dramatically in recent years and is still evolving day to day. Federal legislation has been critical in setting standards for special education services administered by states and local districts. Public Law 94-142 in 1975, which was amended by PL 99-457 in 1986 to include preschool children and infants with serious disabilities, is now called the Individuals with Disability Education Act, or IDEA. IDEA. It articulates the principle that every child with a disability is entitled to appropriate special education at public expense. The current version of the law, IDEA 2004, calls for greater involvement of parents and classroom teachers in the education of children with disabilities. The least restrictive environment clause means that students with special needs must be mainstreamed into general education classes as much as possible. IDEA mandates that in an individualized education program, or the IEP, be prepared for every student with a disability. The principle behind the use of IEPs is to give everyone concerned with the education of a child with a disability an opportunity to help formulate the child's instruction program. An array of services is available for students who are exceptional, including support for the student's general education teacher, special education for part of the day in a resource room, special education for more than 3 hours per day in a special education classroom, special day schools, special residential schools, and homes or hospitals. So let's talk about the response to intervention. Response to intervention, or RTI, means using modifications to instruct or intensive services in the general education classroom before referring a struggling student for special education. RTI approaches generally provide struggling students with 3 tiers of intervention: prevention, which is the whole class; intermediate assistance, small group or individuals; and intensive, extended assistance. Now let us unpack this a little bit more in depth. The emphasis in IDEA 2004 for students with learning disabilities is on response to intervention, an approach in which students are identified for special education services not primarily on the basis of tests, but rather on their ability to profit from increasingly intensive instruction. In particular, children who are struggling in reading might be given small group remediation, one-to-one tutoring, computer-assisted instruction, or other assistance to help them get on track. Only if intensive and long-term intervention have been consistently applied and found to be ineffective might a child be evaluated for potential learning disabilities. And even at this stage, the child's response to the additional assistance would be diagnostically important, as any test scores. Response to intervention is intended to replace the long-standing emphasis on discrepancy between IQ and performance, which has been found to be a poor predictor of actual performance. Now, let us review the response to intervention, which is the three-tier model of services to struggling students. Tier 1 is prevention. Tier 1 consists of whole class strategies designed to help all students succeed. Examples of Tier 1 strategies include giving clear, simple direction to ensure that all students know what to do, teaching study strategies and metacognitive skills, using cooperative learning in small groups, and applying effective classroom management strategies. The idea behind Tier 1 is to use effective teaching methods and to broaden the range for students who can succeed without any special education interventions. Now, perhaps about 80% of students never need anything more than such preventive strategies. Now, moving on to Tier 2, immediate intervention. Even with the best preventative efforts, some students still fall behind the need assistance. The idea in response to intervention is to provide such students with assistance targeted to their needs rather than considering special education. Tier 2 interventions may involve adding time, such as after-school or summer school programs, assigning students to computer-based instruction, or other means of solving the immediate problem. For example, a student who is struggling in reading might receive individual or small group tutoring from teachers, aides, or volunteers so that the problem is resolved as quickly as possible and the student can continue in the regular classroom. Only about 15% of students ever need Tier 2 assistance. Now, moving on to Tier 3, intensive intervention. Tier 3 consists of more intensive interventions for students who have not made sufficient progress in Tiers 1 and 2. Perhaps 5% of struggling students fall in that category. These individuals are at risk for special education or retention, both of which are very expensive and disruptive interventions. So Tier 3 strategies should be intensive and long-lasting as necessary to keep students on track. Tier 3 strategies differ from Tier 2 strategies only in intensity and duration. They might include one-on-one tutoring by teachers or aides, extended small group tutoring, or extra time. Outcomes of these services should be carefully monitored to see that students are making good progress so that any problems are identified and resolved right away. In concept, Tier 3 services could be provided indefinitely as an alternative to assessing students for possible placement in special education. Only when every plausible service has been tried and has failed to resolve the student's problems might special education be considered.